Welcome to Get on the Arc. I'm your host, Darren Conrad. I'm here with Jeff Adams, and Jeff is a self-made entrepreneur. Since you're 18, you overcame ADHD and dyslexia, and you built a successful construction business, and your life kind of transformed after meeting a biochemical engineer who introduced you to the iconic silver and sparking your journey into health. So welcome, Jeff.
Well, thank you for having me aboard. I appreciate all you're doing. It's kind of neat to see how God connects people to really advance his kingdom through a lot of this stuff that we're doing with all natural medicine and just, healing in general. I mean, it's got to be psychological and it's got to be physical.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your journey. Like, so at 18, you're struggling, and then.
My whole family's in construction. So I have uncles and cousins and stuff. So when I was in school, kind of didn't have a direction to go. I, like you said, I have dyslexia and ADHD. So getting into high school, I never finished a written test. They kind of just said, oh, he just doesn't want to learn, or he doesn't want to conform. And I ended up dropping out of high school at 16 years old. Because I wasn't getting the credits and everything, because like I said, I never finished a test, so they couldn't do much. But interesting, I had a couple of teachers that gave me oral tests, and I always got 100% on oral tests. But our systems are kind of rigged to confirmation, and I just wasn't the normal that way. So right out of high school, I opened a construction company. In the summers, I would work construction for my friend's dad, who was a builder. And with my whole family being in the background with construction, it was just seemed like a natural transition. And I ended up having a construction company for 38 years. So it was good. I did well with it as far as, making an income, and more than I could have working other jobs. And in 2007, I met a gentleman. Construction was slow in Chicago, and he was a nuclear biochemical engineer. And we had to go through, when I was working at the building, I had to go through his apartment, and he was in the penthouse. And the man was brilliant. He had over 180 patents on medical devices. And here he is, like almost 80 years old. He has his laptop computer open, and he's like toggling between like 40 different windows, doing calculations and whatever that he does. So being that I lived in the Chicago suburbs, I'm about 40 miles west. So when I got done doing my work for the day, if I left at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, I'd get home at the same time. And I really don't like sitting in traffic. So I would talk to this gentleman for about an hour every day and then head home. And he was fascinating. The one thing that really stood with me as far as through school and stuff is that God gave me a very good memory. So when I was younger, it wasn't quite photographic, but it was, that's how I learned, is just retention through exposures and listening, and not really so much concentrating with ADHD, but my peripheral, I would hear a lot of things and I would just retain that information. And that's why the time that I spent with this gentleman was really like somebody going to college.
Wow.
Well, yeah, the information he had was amazing. He probably forgot more than I will ever know. That's how brilliant he was.
It's great to how God puts people in your life like that.
Yeah, and it was actually there that I realized that I could read formulas. So when I was in school, with math, with calculus and trig, I actually created my own formulas. I would create my own scales, and the teachers would be like, well, wait a minute, how'd you get this answer? I'd be like, well, I just created a scale. And they're like, what do you mean created a scale? Well, if I got one measurement, everything else is percentages. You break it down to the lowest common denominator, the answer is always going to be the same. So you want to go through 22 steps. I just did it this way. And that was part of the reason why I left school, is like, well, wait a minute, they're not recognized, even though I was right in the way that I did it. The recognition that there's only one way to learn is the downfall of schools. It used to be that teachers used to conform to their students and taught them in a way that they could learn. And schools got so big now where, they don't have the personal contact, where it's became, well, you have to learn the way we're going to teach you. And if you don't, we're going to put you on Ritalin, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. And, I believe that schools are really set up more for girls and boys. Boys work better with distractions and little relief, and the camaraderie that we have, joke around, stuff like that, where I think women do better with structure, with things laid out with them so they can fully concentrate.
Right. So what What happened in 2007? Like, what brought you to my chronic silver? Like, how did?
Well, construction slowed. We went through that recession, and at one point I had 27 crews running, and had to lay off a bunch of crews. We didn't sell a project for almost 10 years. So it was like, okay. So I took a job with setting up the clear high-speed wire 4G in Chicago wireless internet. And that's where I met this gentleman. I had to go go to the top of the building, and he was in a penthouse, and that's where I met him at. And like I said, since I wasn't really doing much work there, I was able to spend a lot of time with him and just learn a lot of what he had to offer, what he had to tell me. And it was really interesting because here I am, 20 something years old, 28 years old, 30 years old, and didn't know I could read formulas. And he's working on a calculation, and I look down at it and I go, that's 23.9 grams. He's like, well, you don't know that. You don't know what I'm doing. I said, it's right there. He's like, well, you can't read that. And I'm like, well, this is this, this is this, and this is this, isn't it? I said, this is just part of the periodic table. I really liked chemistry in school. So I kind of knew some of the periodic stuff. He goes, well, you're asking and you're not telling me, so you don't know. I'm like, okay, fine. So 20 minutes later, he gets some of his calculations, and he's like, it's 23.9 grams. I'm like, okay, you just wasted 20 minutes of my life I'll never get back. And he didn't even crack a smile. And he's just like, well, now we know it's right. So it was kind of a, he always had to throw a little dig in there every time he said something, because he really had no sense of humor.
Right.
But he was brilliant.
Wow. Well,
And that just goes to show that, you never know what God's going to have in store for you. I mean, because here, you think, okay, I haven't gone through this training at a young age. I am, pushing 30, around 30 years old. And, I didn't even know I could do this. And then a friend of mine told me about a KFC chicken, Colonel Sanders, how, he didn't find his calling till he was almost 70 years old.
Right.
So when you sit back, and a lot of times we say, well, we're sitting back waiting for God to do something in our life. Well, no, it's God's waiting for us to catch up to what he has in store for us.
Right on. I like that. We have to actually row the boat. We have to take action. Faith without works is dead, right?
Well, and people don't understand, grace without the faith holds no merit. It's actually the faith that activates the grace that allows us to move forward with God's plan.
Right on. Well, so tell us about my chronic silver. Like, what is this supplement, and why should we be taking it?
Okay, so while I was working on this project, I had gotten pneumonia, and it was my fourth time in 6 years getting pneumonia. So I told him, I was like, I can't talk to you today. I have to go to if I get done, I really have to go to the hospital. I got to get stuff. I got pneumonia. And he pulls out a little bottle of clear liquid and says, take this and your lungs won't hurt you in the morning. And that's where, the arrogant contractor in me comes out. And I argued with him for 20 minutes because I knew everything. And I'm like, it's going to, every time it's both lungs, it's pneumonia. I know it's pneumonia. 6 weeks of prednisone and Z-Paks to feel better, months to get my wind back. And I said, so I really need to go to the hospital. And he says, okay, you're so smart. He grabbed it. He took it out of my hand. He's like, go to the doctors, let them kill you, be like everybody else. The world's better off without people like you anyway. And he walked away. And then about 20 minutes later, he walks up to me. Sorry, it was about an hour later. He walks up to me and says, do you know how people die from pneumonia? And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm an asthmatic, so I know the lungs. And, it has something to do with stopping the oxygen in the lungs. And he said, that's not what I asked. Do you know how people die from pneumonia? And I thought about it, and I love comedians. Bernie Mac was one of my favorite comedians. And here's this man with all this money that dies from pneumonia. And I'm like, well, I guess I don't know how people die from pneumonia, but I suppose you're going to tell me. And he says, well, there's 7 medicines that work on pneumonia, and 4 of them are different compilations of the same medicine, like penicillin, amoxicillin, erythromycin, zithromycin. He goes, and they're ineffective within 7 years of each other. So by the time you get it to the 3rd year, it becomes terminal, and the 4th year becomes critical. And he turned around and walked away. Now, being a contractor, I'm pretty good at math. And, 3 times in 7 years is bad. 4 times in 6 years, it has to be worse. So I got done doing what I was doing, and I went up to him and said, okay, I said, I'll try it. He says, I'm not wasting it on you. You're so smart. You're like everybody else. He's like, so he says, it's just going to go home and sit in a drawer, and you're not going to take it, and I'm not wasting it on you. And I said, go get a spoon. I'll take it right here in front of you, because if I take it in front of you, I'll take it at home. I said, because I'm really serious about combating this. And he said, "You're not even going to ask what it tastes like." And that was actually the question he asked me that really made him decide to give it to me. I'm like, I don't care what it tastes like. I know what's in store for me at the hospital. 6 weeks of prednisone and Z-Paks just to start feeling better, and months to get my wind back. And like you said, if there's nothing that works, then why would I go back to the hospital? I said, besides, if you're wrong, this was on a Friday. If you're wrong on Monday, when I come back, I'll be able to tell you, well, you don't know what you're talking about. And so he showed me how to take it, and I took it over the weekend. The next morning I took it, my lungs felt great. And then by the following Monday, when I went back to him, I literally, had no signs of pneumonia whatsoever. And that's when I was like, well, you got to get this stuff out here. This is helping people. It's amazing. And he's like, well, it's a type of silver. I'm like, silver? You mean like mineral bar silver jewelry? You say, yeah. He says, it's just like a type of silver. And I was like, it means silver for healing. How does it work? He said, well, it's been used for thousands of years. He says, so I said, okay. So I said, okay, well, that's amazing. He goes, no, you can't do anything with it. He says, they'll kill you. And I'm like, okay, who's they? And he's like, they, big pharma, the government, the people that control everything. They don't want this out there. And I was like, well, but it's got to get out there. It's really good. He goes, no, don't waste your time. Don't waste my time. You can't do anything with it. So he showed me how to make it. He said he makes a type of ionic silver. I had heard of colloidal silver, didn't know what it was, but he said he makes an ionic silver, but he makes it different. Everybody else is making it wrong, and he had to make the best of everything. So everything he had to do had to be the very best, and he had to be the smartest guy in the room, or he wouldn't talk to anybody. So he showed me how to make it, and I started making it and selling it to friends and family, and it worked really, really well. And so after about 6 months, I called him, and we stayed in contact, and I was like, okay, other than the killing you thing, why won't you do anything with silver? He said, well, because it's like you, it's unstable. It doesn't get along with anything or anybody. And, there's that comment again. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, silver reacts with light, heat, temperature, barometric pressure. It's an imperfect product. 2 degrees temperature difference when you're making it, you have a different product. He goes, so it doesn't want to get along with it. You can't do anything with it. And it's like, but I've been looking it up. There's people that are selling it. He goes, well, yeah, but he goes, silver's work. It's when pharma came out, he goes, they didn't need silver anymore. And so when I started doing my research, I found out that before 1923, silver was the number 1 prescribed antibiotic in the world. And it was most effective. It really came out during the plague, which was 1348 to 1350. And doctors would prescribe people to walk around with silver spoons in their mouth so they wouldn't get the plague. And it was interesting because less than 1% of the wealthy got the plague because they ate off of real silverware. And the scraping of the silver forks and spoons in their mouth would get silver in their system. And that's where that term, were you born with a silver spoon in your mouth, came from, meaning it does not apply to you. You're not going to get sick or the rules don't apply. Actually, the tradition of giving silver pacifiers or a silver spoon to babies as a birthing gift came out during that time. And then if you've heard the wealthy called blue bloods, that was also during that era because of the scraping of the silver on their teeth, got bigger particles of silver in the body. And silver works much like vitamin C. Your body will take what it needs and then expel the rest. And the bigger particles would get caught in the epidermal structure of the skin. And the people would go out in the sunlight and would turn their skin a bluish gray color. And that's why they called them blue bloods.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's a lot of amazing history. Silver's first recorded usage was 3,000 years before Christ. Wow. The Phoenicians would line their water vessels with silver so that it wouldn't stagnate and get moldy. Fast forward to the late 1800s, the scientists would sterilize their petri dish by putting silver dollars in them so they could do their experiments. And then the milk companies, the dairy companies, they would drill holes in silver dollars, put a coin in it, and drop it in milk. So when they delivered milk to the houses, the bottles of milk, they had no refrigeration in the trucks. So people would have an ice box outside, and they would take the milk, they would take it to their front doorstep, pull the silver coin out with the rope, put the lid on it, and stick it in the ice box.
Wow.
So historically, it's been a good product. And then when you look at silver throughout history, before 1965, there was 5,000 references to silver in the journals of medicine. Now there's less than 100 because they don't want you taking it.
At what point along this journey were you like opened up to big pharma, maybe not our friend?
Well, that was my exposure in 2007.
Okay.
When I was doing this, started this off, it was a hobby, it was helping friends and family. And a gentleman who was an attorney, he started buying our product in 2012. And he kept telling me, he said, this is a business. You have a business here. You should really look at, making this into a business. And it's like, I got the construction company, this is fine, maybe years down the road. And then in 2019, God told me that I should give my company away. So I had 27 crews running. So I got my guys together and, for basically said, give me $1, the company's yours. And God put me on a different path. And right as that was happening, I was like, okay, God, you keep saying to give this away, but what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? And, I guess I thought I was stepping out in faith when I gave the company away, but I kept 3 projects in case God didn't show up. And I built thousands of decks and other projects. So it's like, okay, these are easy to do. I can, transition. Well, everything started going horribly wrong on the projects. And they were, they weren't difficult projects. I'd done thousands of them. So I actually, after, a couple of weeks of going wrong, I sat down with the people. I said, I should have never taken your project. Here's all your money back. And they're like, but you have material. It's half done. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Here's all your money back. I should have never taken these projects. They're like, but who's going to fit it? I'm like, you can hire, here's the guys that I had that were working on it. Here's the numbers, that you can hire whoever you want. I'm done. So I'm like, okay, God, I'm trusting in you. And right after that happened, I was asking for a sign, and the gentleman that was an attorney showed up at my doorstep, and my doorbell rings. I answer the door, and he sticks a check for not a super large amount of money in front of my face. He says, "Will you open up the company already?" And I'm like, "Okay, now I think that's a sign." I don't want to be the guy sitting on the roof during the flood, waiting for somebody to come by and save me.
Right.
So it's my journey's been filled with things like that, of just, really trying to step out in faith, realizing my humanity in it all, trying self-reliance, which never works, and once I took myself out of the equation, things just started rolling for us. And the day we opened our company, which was 2019, we went to a health event, and I met some doctors like Sherry Tenpenny and Judy Mikovits, and these people that are now, representing our products or telling people about our products. I got on the Reawake America tour, and this is how good God is. So I got on the tour. That was our income. I mean, that was okay. We're getting by doing these shows and stuff. And then the one show, they said, "Nah, we don't have room for you. You can't come." I'm like, but this is how we earn our income. And he's like, "Yep, sorry, you can't come to this one." It's like, okay, what do we do now? And then somebody called me, I don't remember who, and said, "Hey, there's a show in Texas. It's kind of like the Reawaken. They're a patriot, freedom, medical kind of thing." And so I called, got a hold of the person, said, "Come down there." And I went down there, and I met a gentleman who had his own podcast, like radio station. And he tried our product. He had a sore neck, and he come up to our booth. And I said, "Well, here, put some of this on your neck." So he put it on his neck. We were talking, and literally in like 8 minutes, he's like, my neck pain's gone. I was like, "Yeah, it works that fast." He goes, can we get this stuff on my radio program? I was like, "Yeah." He said, "Well, our average person is like 68 years old or 58 years old." He goes, "So we have a lot of aches and pains, and these people need this stuff. Would you mind coming on and talking about it?" I was like, "Sure, whenever you want to, let's get together." I said, "When I get done with this, I'd be happy to." And that night around midnight, he calls me and said, "I just had dinner with 2 professional wrestlers or retired professional wrestlers that are in a lot of pain. They put this stuff on their knees, and these guys are walking around like they're 15 years old. They're like, oh my God, this stuff is amazing." He goes, "We need to get this on there right now." So I'm like, "Okay, well, we can do something." I said, "Let's get it on there." I said, "What do you want for advertising or marketing?" So what's it going to cost? He goes, "I just want to get it out to the people." I said, "Well, why don't we do an affiliate program for you? And he's like, well, what's an affiliate program? I said, it's where we talk about the product on the show. We give your customers a discount, and then we pay you a small little commission for giving us the format. He goes, well, we don't have anything like that set up. I'm like, don't worry about it. I can set it up. And we did that. And, our sales, went from 5,000 a month to 10,000 a month. The next month, 30,000, next month, 60, next month, 90. I mean, and just blew us up. And that kind of, I could have not paid a marketing company to do that for us, so, and then they changed their format and went secular, and God's like, you need to get off this format. I'm like, but this is our income. And so I'm trying to negotiate with God, which never really works. And so we, again, that's stepping out in faith and going, you know what, I need to take myself aside, and we got off that format. And our sales dropped down back to where they were a little bit higher than that. But God's elevated us. He's just, he's got us in touch with people, and our products work very, very well. And people just kept saying, hey, you know what, I'm gonna tell my cousin about this. They have this issue. They have that issue. And then people started asking me a lot of questions about health. And like we'd get people with eczema, and it's like, will it work on eczema? I'm like, it'll help with the pain and discomfort, but eczema is a deficiency of omega-3s, so you need to start taking omega-3s. But you have to have omega-6 or omega-9, or omega-3s don't assimilate in the body. And so we started educating people on health. And they're like, well, great, which one of your products does that? I'm like, we don't have a product that does that. But I started recommending other people's products and saying, what, you can use this product by this company, and it's a really good product. They're really good people. They're Christian people. So we searched out Christian companies and found out about their products, and we didn't take any income from it. It's like, let's just work on getting you healthy. And, God put it on our hearts to do it, and he's just elevated us immensely.
Wow. So the products, do you have a website? Yeah,
it's mychronicsilver.com. And if you look above my head, you can see Mychronic. It's spelled MICRONIC, silver.com. We do have .net also. And you can read customer testimonies about our products. They work extremely well. We do pray and bless our product with the power of his word and the word of his power, because I'm dyslexic and I never really get it right. So we make sure we cover both of them.
Right.
And we have about a 89% customer reorder rate because our products work. And again, we like coming on with people like you. And one of the things that, God gives me these little revelations as I've been going through time. And, one of the things he put into us is that we really have to educate people. And we have to speak the truth and speak blessings into it. And that's when I kind of really started getting more involved in the political aspects of our society. And when I realized that, God put it in front of me that they're confusing the language. When they were building the Tower of Babylon, they were succeeding. And God confused the language and it crumbled. And now I see them using the lessons of Babylon against us. They're changing the terms, creating chaos and confusion. And, when you hear these groups with their agendas, they're all speaking the same exact thing. And so we need to call it out. And he told me that at the end of times, as it gets darker and darker, his saints are going to shine like bright beacons and speak with a thunderous voice. So we are the ones who need to get it out there, but you are the thunderous voice that's allowing us to get the truth out there.
Wow. Yeah. So the product is, give me some examples of what to take the Mychronic silver for.
So, like I said, before 1923, silver was the number one prescribed antibiotic in the world. So being that we organically stabilized it, we are the only people in the history of the world to stabilize silver. Meaning that because silver reacts with everything, it's an imperfect product. When we stabilized it, we invented the process and created the equipment that makes Mychronic silver. Typically, there's been colloidal silver was the first iteration for that people were selling, and then they went to ionic, and then they went to nano silver. So that was the latest trend. We created Mychronic silver to be different than all of those. It stays active in the body for 8 to 10 hours instead of 6 to 8 minutes like other silvers. Ours is not destroyed by stomach acid like other silvers are. So ours is an ingested and a sublingual delivery. And like we've had people that had food poisoning that took two teaspoons of our product, and in 4 minutes, diarrhea, throwing up, his stomach pain has stopped. But silver works with your immune system, and that's the cool thing about it is that it works with your immune system to build your immune system. So it's really, we just tell people it's really not our product that's doing it; it's your immune system. Silver is a mineral, and this is where people get confused with heavy metal toxicity. When something's toxic to the body, it's a metal. You don't need to have it in your body. When you look at mercury, you look at lead. Those things are toxic to the body because there's no need for them in your body. When you look at gold, you look at silver, you look at zinc, you look at copper. Those are metals and minerals that you have to have in your system to survive. And the silver is the most pure. It's also holds the most conductivity to transfer electrostatic current. And that's why the mycronic silver tends to be the perfect thing for the immune system to help create the fibroblast cells, which are a precursor to stem cells, so you heal faster.
Wow. So you can ingest it orally.
Yeah. We have, if you look above my head, you can see our dietary supplement there. That's an internal one that you take. You can take it as a preventative to boost immune system. And that one's at 27 parts per million. And then we have a topical spray, which is at 50 parts per million. Unlike other companies that put a sprayer on their dietary supplement and go, here's our topical, we made ours twice as strong because you're going to have an amount of evaporation versus penetration. And it's actually that sandwiching effect that has really just blown us up in wound care. So when people take it, you get the healing from the bottom side of the wound and the top side, and then you're trapping any infection in between it. And then with the implementation of our Ozone product, which is the only product we have that doesn't have silver, but that's 100% ozone trapped in Aleotrope oil. So when you do all three of those, the dietary, the topical, and the Ozone, we had a woman who had a skin tear. She was 90 years old. She had a skin tear on her hand about the size of a silver dollar. You could see all the way down to the tendons. 21 days at the hospital. They can't do stitches because the skin is too thin and it'll tear. So her daughter got her on the mycronic silver, and in 14 days was completely healed without even a scar.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then we really got into this movement during the pandemic. We had, I'm a childhood asthmatic, and so is my partner, Michelle. And when COVID hit, I started nebulizing with the mycronic silver. And we realized, and we had a lot of our customers that started doing it and told us by the second inhalation, they started coughing up the thick phlegm. And then when they were traveling, when they were doing the nasal swabs, this is actually when we really started getting busy, is people found out that if you sprayed the mycronic silver in the nasal passages 5 minutes before an airline nasal swab, they'd always come back clean. So people were using it as a cheat code for traveling. And that's when I thought, okay, so we applied for emergency patent tested with another company to have our product tested, and they refused to allow it to be tested.
Wow.
And that's like, okay, this something doesn't make sense because if something works. And then I really, my partner and I, we went down the rabbit hole on checking out why wouldn't you want people to take things that work? And we found out that constitutionally, you cannot create a vaccine if there's a therapeutic that works. And so we had the hydroxychloroquine, the N-acetylcysteine with reduced glutathione and zinc, the MMS. So we had all these things that worked, but they could not say they worked or would not allow them to create a vaccine. And this is part of, to me, the whole nefarious thing of big pharma. I'm really not anti-drug as much as you would think I would be, because if it's taken you 40 years to get this sick, there's not something all natural that's going to knock it out. So you may need a drug. I don't like the over-inoculation. I don't like the over-prescription of drugs. And I don't like the lies and manipulations that big pharma has laid out for us to manipulate us to make decisions that are not in our own interest. And then when you put the political aspect into it, this is the only time in history where somebody could go into the hospital sick with a respiratory infection, have their oxygen below 90% and then send them home. Because I myself as an asthmatic, there was times where I had to go in for nebulization treatment. And when my oxygen fell below 94, they would not let me leave the hospital. They would say, we're going to give you a nebulization treatment with albuterol to open up the lungs. Well, they were sending 80-year-old people home going, if it gets worse, call me. Well, once your oxygen drops below 17% of normal, Now you hallucinate. You don't make rational decisions. So you're sending somebody who's already depleted oxygen, the brain's not functioning properly, and you're sending them home and saying, if it gets worse, come back. Well, these people they can't even make a decision on what sandwich they're going to have, let alone I need to drive myself to the hospital. And this is the first time in history they've decided to inoculate the 99% to protect the 1% that would get sick.
Wow. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for all this information. I'm excited to try the product. We can go to mychronicsilver.com, and you have the several different versions of the product.
Yeah, we have. We're able to make different versions because it's stabilized. So we have our Micro Pro product, which is our strongest one. We made that for athletes, and that's our recovery acceleration program or product that helps shut off the production of lactic acid at the hypothalamus in the brain. So when you're working out, you're not getting the muscle soreness. You can work out the next day. And we've kind of just, evolved from that aspect of it to having our product like our Arcanum 1200, which our customers are saying works better than morphine for pain. And that's the Mychronic Silver with ozone, hemp, and CBD from a Delta 8. It's non-cyclodenic. We have our Mychronic nasal spray, but then we also have our Sonic Mist nasal spray, which is your longtime chronic nasal sufferers versus the Mychronic Silver, which is your allergies. So we've been able to tune it for stuff. And if your listeners want to come on, go to mychronicsilver.com. We'll give them a 10% discount if they want to use put Mychronic in the discount coupon. We'll give them a 10% discount. But they can always call us. My phone number's on there. I do answer my phone. So it's not, we didn't go all on automation. We believe that when people are in need, especially when they're in disease state, that they want answers and they want to feel better now. So we always have somebody to try to answer the phone. We are busy. Give us a chance to call you back. We will call you back. But we would love to hear from your listeners. Awesome.
Well, thank you for getting on the ARC. Thank you for watching Get on the ARC. And for those out there that have a story or want to contact us, we'd love to share your story as well. So again, Jeff, thank you for sharing your message. And until next time.
Well, you know what? God bless you and all your listeners, and let's just keep stepping out in faith.
Amen.
Amen.